Story begins as Suho Kim, accompanied by Javier and 4 small dragons, arrives at some fields. They place their flag there, and the dragons become thrilled upon witnessing this. Suho Kim believes his name to be Suho Kim, but in this realm, his name is Lloyd Frontera. This is the tale of how this average civil engineering student places his shovel on the ground, employs his powers, upgrades the fields, and constructs city structures. He believes that he has turned an entire world upside down and calls Javier, who obediently responds with "Yes, master." Filled with excitement, he exclaims, "This is all money." Javier inquires if he has finally lost it. A few years ago, the scene shifts and the system notifies him that he has been chosen to have a random wish granted by the Absolute. It congratulates him, claps, and informs him that he is now a character in Knight of Blood and Iron. As he lies on the ground receiving these notifications, he contemplates the meaning of the Knight of Blood and Iron and recalls the book he read the previous night. The system wishes him good luck, stating that he has obtained this opportunity. Pondering what wish he made and why he received this stroke of good luck, he realizes he hasn't even had anything to drink. He questions if this is one of those web novels where he has possessed someone from a different world and wonders if he is now in a different world. Considering this, he wonders why he is waking up face down on a dirt road. Attempting to get up while shivering, he remarks it's freezing. He also questions what's wrong with his lips. Meanwhile, a warning health alert is given by the system, notifying him that his jaw has gone out of place due to sleeping on the ground. Expressing irritation, he acknowledges that these alerts are bothering him. He understands that he has taken over some character in this story as he grabs his face to fix his jaw. Curious about whom he has taken over in Knight of Blood and Iron, he wonders why he is the only person who lives in the middle of nowhere and falls asleep on the ground. Javier approaches from behind, calling out to him and stating that he has been searching everywhere for him. Turning to face Javier, he is urged by Javier to return to the manor. Simultaneously, the system notifies him that he is Javier Ashran, the protagonist of Knight of Blood and Iron. Lloyd Frontera contemplates that Javier looks just like in the book and questions if Javier just called him Lloyd Frontera. Realizing that in this book, he is Javier, the renowned swordsman who starts as an unknown knight working for the country Lord Arcos Frontera, and the eldest son of Baron Frontera is the hooligan Lloyd Frontera. Javier mentions that he called his name, but he has never referred to him as a hooligan. He acknowledges that it's good that he is self-aware at least. The system notifies him that Javier seems to be in a good mood, and he thinks he can see that, telling him to quiet down already. They arrive at the palace, where Javier lights the fire pot and inquires if he has no idea how he ended up in that state. He explains that he started drinking in the afternoon, got drunk, destroyed the pub furniture, and then passed out on his way back to the manor. Reflecting on this, he muses that it truly is a day in the life of a hooligan. Javier adds that his lordship was worried and sent him because, despite being a hooligan, he is still his son. He emphasizes that if he were to die on the road with his jaw out of place, his father would be sad. He reflects on how Javier manages to sneak those attacks in. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera shivers and reflects that it's cold. He wishes the floor could be heated like an ondol, but quickly dismisses the idea, realizing that this is a medieval fantasy novel. He covers himself with a blanket. Javier informs him that he will leave him to rest and will report what happened to his lordship the next day. Lloyd Frontera questions if he has to, and Javier confirms it, prompting him to think that Javier is uptight. As Javier walks towards the door to leave, Lloyd Frontera calls out to him, mentioning that their family has a lot of debt. Javier closes his eyes, finding the statement strange, opens the door, and goes out. He reflects that he knows everything that happens in this story. Just the previous night, in his cramped boarding house room with a microscope, he read the last chapter. He thinks of course he knows what happened to Lloyd Frontera. He contemplates the first part of the story where the Baron and Baroness fall victim to an evil conman, lose all their land and fortune, and eventually commit suicide. Following this, Lloyd Frontera becomes a beggar, indulging in day-long drinking, and then meets his demise. Expressing a need for more beer, he utters "bring him more beer" while resting his head on the table. He coughs up blood and succumbs to death. Reflecting on his circumstances, he questions the point of being an aristocrat if life ends up being just as miserable as it was in Korea. Pondering the nature of the Absolute and the system, he receives notification that he has been chosen to have a random wish granted by the Absolute. He wonders what wish he could have made to end up in the body of someone with such a tragic ending. After a while, Marbella Frontera, Lloyd's mother, arrives and inquires if he broke things at the pub the previous night. He refuses and says last night he was reading a book. She urges him, begging him to go to the pub and apologize. He thinks it's likely a mess caused by this body, so he agrees to clean it up and confirms that he will do it. The system notifies him that these two people are highly confused by his response, and he wonders if they could not give him at least a little credit. Outside the palace, a person gathers some cow food in his cart, spots Lloyd Frontera and Javier, and hides behind his cart, scrambling away. As they approach, other people also get scared upon seeing them. A kid stands in his window, looking at them, while his father quickly reaches there, grabs him, and advises him not to make eye contact, instructing him to close the window. The system notifies that the villagers absolutely detest him, and he acknowledges that he understands. He then asks Javier why he is following him. Javier responds that his lordship ordered him to escort him to prevent a recurrence of what happened yesterday. Lloyd Frontera inquires about the meaning of escort for him, to which Javier replies that it's hardly for him. It's for the villagers, as he is protecting them on his behalf. Lloyd Frontera comments that Javier is like a gangster and considers that the first thing he needs to do is get rid of the scumbag image he has. This way, he can at least secure some food when he becomes a beggar. He contemplates whether he can sort out his family's debt before that happens and imagines living peacefully as the heir to a country baron, enjoying a sweet and comfortable life to a ripe old age. He contemplates whether there is no cheat code or skill he can use while examining the status screen. He observes that indeed there is a skill. The system then notifies him about his skills. One is Human Scum, a passive skill causing others to furrow their brows, and another is Rowdy Drunkard, which turns him into an absolute nuisance when activated. Waving his hand in anger, Javier asks where he is going. Lloyd Frontera realizes and questions why Javier is asking. Javier points out that the pub is over there and reminds him of his promise to apologize. He denies lying and explains that he was just thinking about something. Javier asks what's wrong, Lloyd Frontera reassures him, and they proceed to enter the pub. Lloyd Frontera opens the door and politely says excuse him. He notices that something has seemed off since last night, feeling as if he is a completely different person. As he looks inside, he observes that everything is broken. He then takes a seat at a table and apologizes, acknowledging that everything that happened the previous night was his fault. The system notifies that the pub owner has assumed an extremely high alert position. Shivering, the pub owner implores Master Lloyd, begging him not to do this. Lloyd Frontera, confused by the sudden politeness of this scumbag, becomes even more terrified. Trying to maintain a level of rudeness, he says he guesses he's sorry. The system notes that his apology doesn't seem very genuine and wonders what he is supposed to do. The pub owner reassures him that it's fine, and they both leave. As they walk, Lloyd Frontera observes that even with his apology, the pub owner doesn't seem all that happy. Javier explains that it's to be expected, as everything was destroyed the previous day. Furniture and decorations were purchased with the pub owner's hard-earned money, and he likely won't be satisfied until he is compensated. He contemplates the challenge of compensating the pub owners when they are burdened with so much debt. He wonders if it's difficult to earn favor with the villagers and realizes that unless they repay the debt, nothing is going to change. Javier adds that not only that, but the pub owner's mother is unwell after the late winter cold, and when combined with his misconduct, he can imagine how tough things must be for him. Considering the chilly atmosphere inside the pub, Lloyd Frontera notes that a single fireplace isn't enough to heat the entire building. He reflects that the elderly can't endure such cold for long unless they have an ondal floor. Looking at a flickering bulb, he suddenly grasps an idea. It's as if a light bulb went off in his head. He visualizes and constructs a building structure, realizing that there are no ondal floors in this world. If he builds them here, they would undoubtedly sell. He contemplates that the hooligan Lloyd Frontera could never dream of these capabilities, but the real him, Suho Kim, envisioned such things during his time in school, particularly when majoring in civil engineering. Recollecting his experience as a military engineer in the army, he recalls constructing a house independently and working day and night at construction sites. Feeling confident about his skills, he believes that with this knowledge, he can settle all of the Baron's debts, clenching his hand in determination. He suggests returning to the pub, asking why, and answering that it's to get his first order. The system notifies that his true journey has begun, and the RP system has been activated, with RP meaning relationship points. Another notification indicates that he can earn RP by improving relationships with key characters, and currently he has 0 RP. Lloyd Frontera contemplates the concept of RP, wondering if it's similar to experience points. He realizes there's nothing indicating how he can use them to improve relationships with key characters. The system notifies him that he can earn RP by enhancing relationships with these characters. Observing something on the system, he realizes that his approval rating is -30, considering it low and even super low. He calls Javier, complimenting him on his good looks. The system notifies that Lloyd is attempting to buy Javier's favor, resulting in Javier's approval rating decreasing by 1 point to -31. Lloyd questions why it went down, deciding to leave it for later, understanding that rushing it may only worsen the situation. After a while, they once again reach the pub, and Lloyd Frontera declares that he has purchased it. Asserting that he will be the builder, he proceeds to write a contract and hands it over to the pub owner. He informs the pub owner that they will write off all construction fees against the property he damaged, instructing him to sign the contract. The system notifies him that the pub owner is looking at him suspiciously, recognizing the lack of trust in him. The system further notifies that the pub owner uses the skill stone wall heart. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges that his big plan can't fail from the start and reluctantly decides to use his hooligan image. He urges the pub owner, saying, "Come on, they're going to see each other a lot from now on. Let's trust each other." He believes it worked as he observes the pub owner signing the contract. The system, however, notifies him that he is considered absolute garbage, leaving him contemplating what he could have done. Despite this, he feels satisfied, thinking he got his first order. He folds the document and places it in his coat pocket, catching Javier's gaze. He expresses confidence that he has made the right choice and assures that he won't let him down, smiling as they both exit the pub. Considering the upcoming construction, he feels it's going to be pretty cozy, allowing him not to be too precious with his measurements, all while holding a shovel. Javier calls out to him, and he asks what he wants to say. Javier reveals that he threatened the pub owner to sign the contract and questions if he is coming up with new ways to cause trouble. Looking at Javier, he asserts that he's not as reasonable as he seems and inquires if Javier has ever heard of cognitive distortion. Javier asks about cognitive distortion, and he explains that it's when one believes someone will act a certain way because of their past actions, a distortion caused by prejudice and negative thinking clinging to the brain. Javier argues that it's not prejudice, but is based on experience and statistics. He responds, questioning if experience and statistics are not all derived from the past, and wonders if he was always this smooth of a talker. Determined, he states that he will make them smile, referring to the pub owner and his mother, and tries to dig the ground with his shovel. He believes that their smiles will be the foundation of his money-making. As he envisions the process of scooping out the dirt, moving it, and packing it, he plans to use timber from the warehouse at the Baron's residence for a traditional timber frame. He intends to complete the walls using the clay he dug up from the river, constructing a small house. Exhausted, he lies down on the ground, feeling the fatigue in his weakened body. Javier remarks that it didn't take long, only 3 cuts. Lloyd Frontera becomes shocked and corrects him, stating that it took a week. He contemplates the fact that he is indeed building something and questions if he is genuinely planning to honor his contract with the pub owner. Doubtful about the hooligan Lloyd Frontera keeping his word, he attempts to get up while trembling and acknowledges that he is sore, but there's no time to rest. Holding an axe, he endeavors to cut a log into 2 pieces. Javier steps forward, grabbing his hand to assist him in cutting the log. Taking the axe from his hand, Javier inquires about what he needs him to do. Lloyd Frontera replies that he needs thin, little pieces of wood, each about 2 hands length tall, 1 hand's length wide, and 1 finger thick, demonstrating the size of his hands. Javier takes the log, throws it in the air, cuts it into pieces, and slices it to meet his specifications. Surprised and appreciative of Javier's skill, Lloyd Frontera thinks that this is truly someone about to become a master swordsman who needs modern equipment. He approaches Javier, placing his hand on Javier's shoulder, and suggests that when he's done, he should help him with the digging. Meanwhile, Javier reflects that instead of receiving thanks, he is given more work to do. He believes that this man truly is hopeless, and the system notifies him that Javier regrets his decision. Lloyd Frontera asks if Javier is helping out of curiosity and questions how he will manage to con people, stating that he genuinely wants to see what happens. Lloyd Frontera asserts that they need to finish the work faster, and the way to do that is by actually doing it. Observing Lloyd Frontera, Javier acknowledges that he has changed significantly in just a few days. However, his past makes him utterly impossible to trust. Javier thinks that the only option is to hurry up the process, and they both start digging on the grounds, sweating a lot. After some time, they emerge and Lloyd Frontera becomes excited, declaring that the construction is complete. He carves some symbols onto a piece of wood and Javier examines them, asking if those are letters. Lloyd Frontera confirms that they are, explaining that it's his brand's logo. Javier then questions what a logo is, and Lloyd Frontera responds that it's a thing, suggesting they go find out. He ponders what kind of con he has devised for the pub owner. After lighting a fire in the fire pot, the pub owner's mother lies down on the floor, expressing delight and relaxation, claiming it's lovely. The pub owner is surprised and asks how it can be so good. Lloyd Frontera believes that this must be astounding to the people of this world and attributes it to the powers of the Ondal floor, describing it as magical. The pub owner's mother creates a magical circle under her on the ground, and the pub owner expresses gratitude, mentioning that it has been a long time since he has seen his mother smile like this. Javier observes that the pub owner and his mother smiled just as Lloyd Frontera said they would. He contemplates the change in his speech and manners, realizing that now he works hard and keeps his promises to the people of the land. He questions if he really did this to make those people smile, considering that Lloyd Frontera would never do such a thing. Despite his disbelief, those two people are currently happy. The system notifies him that his approval rating by Javier has increased by 2 points, bringing it to -29, and he earned 36 RP for slightly improving his relationship with a key character. Smiling, he looks at the status screen and acknowledges that he knows what he's thinking. He comments, "Wow, this guy isn't total garbage after all," and says he thinks he is. He firmly denies it, stating that he is not total garbage. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera thinks that regardless, they have broken ground now, and even though the cost of the timber resulted in a total loss, that's not important. He considers that this house is merely his model house, intended for show. A few days later, people arrive to inspect the house and offer him a contract to build a similar one for them. One person expresses amazement, thinking they were going to melt, and another inquires about the cost. Lloyd Frontera responds that it's amazing and warm, suggesting they probably want a room like this at home too, tapping his hand on the table. He explains that Style A is an annex in the yard, and Style B involves remodeling their current home. Lloyd offers a 10% discount on the construction cost if they order both styles. The system notifies that the villagers don't trust him, and one person refuses his offer. Lloyd insists, urging them to trust each other since they'll see each other often. However, the person remains distrustful, questioning if he is really doing this and stating that at this price, he's practically giving it away. Lloyd's father, Arcos Frontera, arrives and calls him, asking what he thinks he is doing. The system notifies that his approval rating has reached -20. Lloyd Frontera sits with his father and has dinner, contemplating how he has managed to avoid him until now. But what if his father stops him from the building? Arcos Frontera says, so let's hear it. What is it that he's up to this time? Lloyd thinks to keep this short, using his best rude Lloyd voice, and says the pub owner ordered an Ondal room, so he built him one, while he eats. His father asks if other people from this land are making orders as well, and Lloyd replies that he seems to know it all already, chewing his food. Arcos Frontera emphasizes that they must look after the people, and he won't tolerate him lying to or tricking them. Lloyd reassures him that he isn't planning to, so his father shouldn't worry. Lloyd thinks that he figured, no matter what he does, everyone will think the worst. He decides that if they're finished with dinner, he will take his leave and get up from his seat. Meanwhile, he contemplates run, get out of here. His father asks if this is all because of their family's situation and points out that he has eyes and ears, so he must know what is going on. He reassures him not to worry, stating that he can get them out of this trouble soon, so he shouldn't get too involved. Reflecting on those words, Lloyd Frontera recalls that a bearded person once told him it'll all be fine, so don't worry. The person suggested that it's nothing, just keep his head down and study hard. Lloyd thought everything would be okay at that time, and now declares the person a liar. He expresses that he knows it's not okay, and he won't be miserable again because of money. He implores his father not to give up because he won't either, walking out. Reflecting on that time a few years ago, he wishes he had said those words to his father then. In the present, he assesses their current situation, noting they have 32 Style A orders and 57 Style B orders. He mentions that he has received half of the money for construction. Meanwhile, moneylender Meatloaf and moneylender Shiloh arrive, and he observes them, pondering their arrival. He, being the son of the Lord, is surprised that they don't stop to greet him. He wonders if those two are the moneylenders as they go inside. Shiloh addresses Baron Arcos Frontera, asking how much longer he is going to put this off while sitting at the table. Meatloaf adds that 5 days have passed since the agreed-upon date, and if he continues to procrastinate, they will have no choice but to take action. Shiloh questions if the cat has got his tongue, suggesting that he could sell some items in this place to get some money. Lloyd Frontera secretly listens to their conversation, thinking it's perfect timing and they're here just in time. The system notifies that his current RP is 36. Reflecting on gaining some RP after raising Javier's approval rating, he ponders how to use it. That is the question. The system informs him that he can invest RP in gaining abilities, and he remarks, "Wow, so this pop-up punk actually knows how to explain things." The system advises him to forget it, and he apologizes, promising to stop and asking for forgiveness. The system displays a slow download while a magical circle appears under his feet, revealing the skills detected. Soil mechanics, hydraulics, structural mechanics, water supply and sewage theory, steel structure design, concrete design, and advanced design programming. The system notes that he knows more than he looks, and he asks if he really needs to say that, highlighting that he has a scholarship. The system notifies him that the skills available are based on existing knowledge, with 15 points needed for basic surveying RP and 20 points needed for basic design RP. He thinks he can't tell what those are based on just this information and decides to click and see. He clicks on Basic Design, activating the skill named Basic Surveying. Meanwhile, he opens his room window and exclaims what this is. His eyes shine as he observes a beautiful city structure outside the window. He wonders if this is for real, realizing that he doesn't need a GPS surveyor, he can see it all with his own eyes. Utilizing the basic design skill, he creates a design in the air and modifies it with his hand. Reflecting on the past, he acknowledges that before this, he worked hard, scribbling down plans for the channels. He believes things will definitely be a lot easier going forward, but he questions whether Javier alone will be enough to cover all the construction. Considering the possibility of summoning heavy machinery with his knowledge, he notices an escalator. The system notifies him that if he wants a summon, there is something, leaving him surprised and prompting him to ask what this means. The system notifies him about a random summon game and prompts him to spend RP to choose a summon with unique personalities and a wide range of skills. He enters the game to acquire his loyal summon partner. Reflecting on this, he wonders if it's some kind of advertisement for a premium game. The system then notifies him that the random summon game has started, and one turn requires 50 RP. Contemplating the potential usefulness of a summon, he sees some summon monsters and believes it could be as practical as heavy machinery. He acknowledges the need to obtain more RP and understands that to achieve that, he must make key characters like him. On the other side, Meatloaf places his hand on the table in anger and suggests to Baron Frontera that if he has no money, he should consider allowing him to make a suggestion. He proposes that selling the Baroness and her ladies to a very nice place could fetch a hefty sum. Arcos Frontera becomes angry, stands up, and rebukes Meatloaf for such a suggestion, emphasizing that being a lender doesn't excuse him from lacking manners. Lloyd Frontera approaches from behind, placing a hand on Meatloaf's shoulder. Startled, Meatloaf jumps away and questions Lloyd's identity. Arcos Frontera, in turn, asks why his son is present. Meatloaf refers to Lloyd as the eldest son with peculiar manners and questions why he is rudely interrupting their discussion. Lloyd Frontera dismissively says whatever, now show him his warrant. Meatloaf asks what he means, and Lloyd Frontera cites the Royal Family and Nobility Act, Article 3, Clause 6, stating that all nobles may exercise their right to protect their interests as vassals of the king. He explains that entry into the residence of a noble family without a warrant is considered trespassing, emphasizing that it's the key section. Meatloaf questions what he is talking about, and Shiloh claims he has never even heard of such a law. Lloyd Frontera challenges them, suggesting they go find out together. Lloyd Frontera calls for Javier, who arrives promptly. He then instructs Javier to cut off the trespasser's arm. Seeing Javier, both Meatloaf and Shiloh become scared. Meatloaf asks what is happening, and Shiloh questions if they are going to sue. Ignoring their protests, he insists on finding out whose side the judge will take. Javier draws his sword, intensifying their fear, and they both run away. Meatloaf expresses concern, asking if he thinks he'll get away with this, and Shiloh warns that he'll regret it. Lloyd Frontera dismisses their objections as absurd. His father addresses Lloyd and Javier, questioning what they just did and stating that they don't have enough to stave off consequences. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera places a bag on the table and states that he plans to give it to him after collecting all the money from the orders, but this should be enough to cover a significant part of this month's interest. His father inquires about the money from the orders, expressing concern that he may be taking money from their people. Javier assures him that he will ensure that Master Lloyd fulfills the orders and notes while looking at his face, and that he completely trusts Javier. Lloyd Frontera then announces that they will take their leave, and they both exit. Javier asks how he came to know about such a law, as he always thought Lloyd was the ignorant type. He explains that he just picked it up somewhere and asks if Javier is happy. Javier reflects that it's true, Lloyd did pick it up from him in the book. He recalls the time right after the Baron and Baroness committed suicide, and the two loan sharks came to dig up the bodies and sell them. That's what Javier says. Javier mentions the Royal Family and Nobility Act, Article 3, Clause 6, stating that all nobles have the right to protect their interests as vassals of the king. After he utters these words, he envisions the consequence off with their heads, and he swiftly beheads them. He believes that if Javier were brought before a judge, he would be found not guilty. Lloyd Frontera, aware of the story's content, considers it a significant advantage, thinking that he should be receiving a pop-up any second now. The system notifies him that Baron Frontera's approval rating has increased by 6 points, earning him 60 RP for improving his relationship with a key character, and his current RP is 61. He thinks that everything is proceeding according to plan, and he's on his way to summoning. Lloyd Frontera reaches his fields, looks around, and notices there's no one nearby. He asks if anyone is there and instructs them to show him the summon game. He clicks on the start button and a magical system appears, surprising him. He wonders if it's a magic circle and finds it excessively extravagant, not to mention incredibly small. As he listens to some sounds emanating from the magical circle, he thinks it's overly noisy. Suddenly, a baby squirrel emerges from the circle and leaps towards him. Lloyd looks at the squirrel and remarks, "So it's a dud." The squirrel responds with "Peepodong," but Lloyd can't understand. He clarifies that the squirrel is not a dud and can help him. When asked how Lloyd suggests shooting acorns, the squirrel rejects the idea, saying he doesn't need it. Lloyd then demonstrates what he can do while the squirrel eats something, only to quickly spit it out. Lloyd considers it terrible and picks up 2 papers that the squirrel spat out, revealing them as user manuals. Meanwhile, Peepodong introduces himself, stating that he is an adorable hamster who deserves lots of love. He requests to be fed one of the enclosed sunflower seeds, ensuring it's a red sunflower seed. Peepodong grows to gigantic proportions, effective for a maximum of 12 hours. Lloyd obtains a blue sunflower seed and feeds it to Peepodong, causing him to shrink back to a smaller size before the 12-hour limit is up. Lloyd remarks that one set of the 2 colors of sunflower seeds is 1 RP and asks how big Peepodong can get, questioning if he can reach the size of a person. Peepodong responds by saying his name, encouraging Lloyd to see for himself and making him eat the seeds. Considering that hamsters are skilled at tunneling, Lloyd believes that if Peepodong can grow to the size of a human, it would be quite helpful. As Peepodong consumes the seed, a flash appears so loud that it throws Lloyd away. Confused, he wonders what it is, only to realize that Peepodong has transformed to 15 feet. He corrects himself, realizing it's over 30 feet high as he looks at the enormous Peepodong. He observes Peepodong, noting the hamster's smug and cocky appearance. The system notifies him that Peepodong's skill is digging level 1. Peepodong swiftly runs and makes a dig in the ground. The system also provides another notification, indicating that Peepodong has packing dirt level 2 and another skill, cheek pocket level 1. Peepodong once again spits out a huge ball, prompting Lloyd Frontera to consider it a jackpot. He has acquired his heavy equipment and returns, contemplating the potential suspicion if someone sees him suddenly carrying such a large item. To address this, he decides to carry a book on summoning with him. If anyone asks, he plans to confidently state that he is a summoning master, resolving any potential issues. Pleased with his clever solution, he marvels at his intelligence. He then shifts his focus to figuring out the labor aspect of their construction project. After a while, in the morning, he instructs his 30 soldiers from Lloyd Frontera's barony to repeat after him, emphasizing safety first, and they comply. He finds it frustrating that they seem like soldiers who are paid to do nothing, especially considering the Baron's substantial debt. Reflecting on the situation, he realizes that, thanks to him, he now has free labor that he can put to good use. Addressing the soldiers, he asserts that they are all soldiers, and that this assembly is their army. He questions the purpose of an army, emphasizing that it's meant to carry out work. Recalling his own time in the army, he mentions spending more time digging holes and pulling weeds than actual training. Pointing to a pile of clay, he identifies it as the clay he spent the entire previous night digging up, acknowledging that Pipodong managed to do it in just 30 minutes. Nevertheless, he states that they are on the verge of breaking ground for their estate's renaissance. He explains that he is referring to the Ondal construction business, and for the people to participate, he needs all of them to move the clay to the construction site. He believes it's okay, as he expected this situation. Newman, a senior knight in Lord Frontera's barony, calls Lloyd Frontera and questions why he is instructing his men to do this task. Lloyd anticipates such a confrontation. In this land, there are 3 knights: Newman, the current man under him Baron, and the protagonist of the novel, Javiera Srehan. Reflecting on the characters, Lloyd thinks that at the start of the book, when the estate falls into ruin, Javier and Baron remain loyal until the very end. However, their friend Newman is the first to betray the Baron and run. This is because Newman sells information on the Baron to con men, leaving him with a huge debt. He contemplates that it won't do for this man to be the land's foremost knight and questions what it looks like he's doing. Newman responds that he has ordered these honorable men to cover themselves in the dirt, asserting that as their commander, he won't tolerate this. Dismissing it as nonsense, Lloyd Frontera believes Newman is unhappy because he's close to making money that could pay off the debts. He adds that he has his father's permission for the task. Newman counters, stating that he doesn't know how Lloyd fooled his lordship. He reminds Lloyd of his prior conduct, suggesting that he can think of no other reason for him to use his men other than for personal gains, and asks if he is wrong. Lloyd responds with a challenge, stating that it sounds right if Newman wants a beatdown. Observing Lloyd, Newman thinks about how this fragile man would break down if he ever played an online game, imagining his fingers flying across the keyboard. Lloyd digs with a shovel, deciding to press Newman's buttons. He throws dust on Newman and tosses some towards him. In response, Newman questions if Lloyd just insulted a knight's honor, asserting that he is nothing but the son of a poor, soon-to-be-ruined baron. Lloyd, provocatively, puts his hand to his ear, asking what was that. Let's forget about ranks and fight this out. He points his shovel towards Newman and proposes a duel, challenging him to face it. Newman accepts, declaring that Lloyd will regret it. Javier states that he will duel with Sir Newman in 1 month and asks if Lloyd Frontera is confident that he can win. Lloyd responds, expressing disbelief at Javier's question, questioning if he is dumb. He clarifies that, of course, he is not confident. He describes himself as a low-level sword expert knight who can use the mana heart skill, considering himself a nobody. Lloyd asks what Javier thinks and if he is even thinking. Reflecting on the situation, Lloyd considers how close he was to cutting Javier down, only for Javier to suddenly throw dirt in Sir Newman's face and challenge him to a duel. Lloyd finds it all too calculated and believes that Javier asked the Baron to separate them to provoke a fight. He further reflects on how Javier designated Sir Baron as a substitute overseer to supervise the work of the soldiers. Now Javier claims he's not confident about the duel, and Lloyd doesn't understand it at all. Meanwhile, he contemplates how filthy Javier appears, wishing he could cut him down. He addresses Javier, stating that there's something he needs him to do, teach him how to use a sword. Javier refuses, emphasizing that his job is solely to observe, and furthermore, if someone like Lloyd, whom he refers to as scum, were to learn how to use a sword, it would pose an even greater danger to those around him. He asks if Lloyd isn't supposed to tone it down when corrected. Lloyd responds, dismissing Javier's concerns and expressing his desire to learn sword fighting, even if it means curing his insomnia. Reflecting on this, he wonders how Javier knows about his insomnia, realizing it's in the book. He also notes that Javier knows the cause of his insomnia and laughs. He reflects on the book The Knight of Blood and Iron, where knights are typically divided into 4 ranks, from low-level sword expert to mid-level sword expert, then high-level sword expert, and finally reaching sword master level. He contemplates that Javier is on the verge of transitioning from a high-level sword expert to a sword master, considering it a side effect of achieving that rank. Despite being in a backwoods location, he dismisses any notion that Javier would know such details. He straightforwardly asks if they have a deal, emphasizing that it's no use pretending, as his insomnia is evident. Javier agrees, stating that they can try, and Lloyd seeks confirmation that there are no takebacks. Javier assures him that he knows for a fact Lloyd will fail. He mentions that Lloyd has tried various remedies, including sleep cognition therapy, herbs, aromatherapy, exercise, and even Eastern medicine, without finding a cure for his insomnia. Meanwhile, Javier sits in a chair, hugging a pillow as he sleeps, while Lloyd Frontera laughs, claiming he has him all figured out. Lloyd also knew how he was going to cure his insomnia. Reflecting on the process, he recalls falling into a deep sleep while listening to a magic spell. Considering this, he decided to read Javier his reinforced concrete textbook, which proved to be at least 18 times more sleep-inducing than any magic spell. Now he believes his improved swordsmanship is a result of this unconventional approach. The next morning, they head to the ground, and Javier instructs Lloyd to do 50 laps around the perimeter. While Lloyd starts running without complaint, Javier observes him. Lloyd explains that he should teach him some skills while he is tired due to exhaustion. Javier expresses surprise, stating he thought Lloyd wouldn't do it. Lloyd asks if he thought he would just refuse and resumes running again. He laughs and declares that now he's going to finish running. The system notifies him that the passive skill Annoying Brat has risen to level 4, causing the lump he calls ahead to call out to the people around, tempting them to deliver a slap. Reflecting on the situation, he acknowledges that he just made that up and admits that it's hard. Honestly, he would be lying if he said it wasn't, but compared to when he was in Korea, this is so much better. He reflects on the absence of even a family to welcome him, waking up each day in a tiny room at a boarding house. Recalling the days spent carrying bricks up to the roof of a 4-story building and loading and unloading delivery trucks all night, he realizes it was all to prevent starvation. Despite the hardships, he held on to the hope that one day things would get better as he continued his work, carrying many bricks up to the 4th floor. He thinks hold on a little longer and it'll get better someday. He believes he's working so hard and deserves it. Just a little more effort, and he tries to move forward. Unfortunately, he falls down, and his bricks also tumble. Reflecting on the pain and despair he experienced before, he considers this a minor setback. It's nighttime, and he continues running at the park. Meanwhile, Javier observes his determination and decides to teach him sword fighting techniques. The system notifies him that his approval rating with Javier has increased by 1 point, although his overall approval rating is still at -28. He earns 18 RP for improving his relationship with a key character, bringing his current RP to 29. After a while, Lloyd Frontera informs Newman that he can't believe Newman's disrespect, especially considering Newman has protected their family for 5 generations. He expresses disappointment, mentioning that he thought Newman had come to his senses recently, but now realizes he was wrong. Lloyd states that he sees no just cause to stop the duel. However, as Newman's heir, he advises not to be too harsh and to avoid causing serious harm. The goal is to pull the cocky hooligan, Lloyd Frontera, back to his senses. Newman complies, saying as he wishes while bowing down. In his thoughts, Newman acknowledges that duels don't always go as planned. He contemplates the possibility of cutting off Lloyd's head, killing him, and if the Baron takes issue with that, he plans to kill the Baron and Baroness too. Newman intends to disguise it as a suicide. He envisions leaving the tiny village and relocating to a larger place. Newman appreciates that thanks to Lloyd's actions, things are speeding up for him. He laughs and confidently walks out. The scene shifts 1 month later, and both Lloyd Frontera and Newman arrive for the duel. Their parents and numerous other people gather to witness the event. Newman addresses Lloyd, asking if he is ready as he takes out his sword. In response, Lloyd kicks his shovel and confidently states that he is ready to knock Newman's lights out. Lloyd Frontera stands there, holding his shovel. Someone asks, "What is that?" Another person inquires if he is going to fight Sir Newman with it. Newman becomes angry upon seeing this. Javier looks at them and envisions a solid iron shovel. That's what he had requested from the blacksmith. Arcos Frontera hides his face and remarks, "That boy, so it was all a joke in the end?" Javier contemplates the joke, but finds it hard to believe. Reflecting on the past month, he recalls basic training performed in the early hours without a peep, running around construction sites to instruct village engineers about Ondal, and engaging in sword work practice until bedtime. He concludes that such actions do not align with someone preparing a joke, and Master Lloyd appears more serious than ever. Arcos Frontera declares, "Now, let the duel between Lloyd Frontera and Sir Newman begin." Newman is moving to attack him with a sword, and Lloyd Frontera is prepared with his shovel to fight back. Javier wonders, what is with that lackluster pose? Newman attacks and asks if he is playing with him. Lloyd Frontera points out his shovel. Everyone is shocked to see this. Newman thinks luck does not strike twice. Lloyd Frontera counterattacks. Javier observes that his movement is so efficient. It's a skill adapted specifically for real-life fighting, and it's as if their swordsmanship has evolved through the ages. Newman looks at him strangely. Lloyd Frontera wonders why he is so surprised, mentioning that any Korean man would know how to do this. He believes this is the essence of modern hand-to-hand combat, bayonet training. He attacks Newman with a shovel, thinking that, besides, the shovel is a much more formidable weapon than one may think. He halts Newman's sword attacks with his shovel and contemplates that the wide blade can be used as a shield. It can cut through thick tree roots, and if he does this, he can ride it like a pogo stick. He pushes his shovel into the ground and confidently says, "Bring it on, come at me." Javier observes all of this happening and wonders if this is all a joke or not. Newman is moving to attack him, and he steps back, considering the first weapon he has prepared to use against Newman, a shovel. The second weapon is the basic sword fighting steps he has learned from Javier. He swiftly moves to attack Newman. Newman is shocked and wonders where this strength comes from, thinking of him as a bottle-loving lowlife. His third weapon is revealed. The system window notifies that the skill expansion for shoveling is at level 1, and now the shovel is his. All of his physical stats increase when he holds a shovel. He moves to attack and considers the +1 in the approval rating he gained while training with Javier, along with the +2 and 3 from the Baron and Baroness, who saw their son working hard for the first time in his life. This brought his RP up. The system window notifies that the current RP is 97 and asks if he would like to learn the skill extension shoveling, requiring an RP equal to 40. He thinks it gave him the sweetest skill ever, and he is ready to fight. Newman heavily exhales and thinks he has no other choice against the civilian. He does not believe he would need to do this. He starts using his magical power. Javier looks at him strangely. A ghostly light appears near Newman's heart. Lloyd Frontera looks at him and thinks he is summoning a mana heart. Newman is ready to attack and declares they are only getting started, hooligan. He proceeds to initiate the attack. Javier observes this and contemplates that it takes over 10 years for someone lacking the necessary skills. For an average person, it takes at least 5 years to summon a mana's heart. It would be impossible for Master Lloyd to block an attack normally with so much mana. Newman attacks with a sword, and Lloyd Frontera attempts to stop him with a shovel. He believes he will crush that black head of Newman's in one fell swoop. Lloyd Frontera's father and mother are shocked to witness this. Lloyd Frontera tries to halt the attack with a shovel, realizing it feels like all the strength in his body is leaving him. Now, for the fourth weapon he has prepared, the mana conjuring skill that made Javier the strongest man in the world in this story. He recalls the Israhan core technique and begins absorbing Newman's power. Newman gets shocked and inquires if Lloyd Frontera absorbed his mana. Lloyd Frontera seizes the opportunity and forcefully strikes Newman's face with the shovel, causing him to break his teeth. He gazes at it and wonders, what's that, and if that is his tooth. Lloyd Frontera retaliates by once again striking him with the shovel. As Newman is on the verge of falling, Lloyd Frontera delivers another blow to his head with the shovel. Everyone is astonished by this turn of events. One person inquires if Master Lloyd emerged victorious, while another questions what is happening. Yet another person remarks that this is bizarre. Arcos Frontera declares Lloyd Frontera the winner of the duel. Newman falls to the ground and ponders, what did he say? The sword expert lost to that lowlife? Lloyd Frontera asks if he heard correctly and asserts that he won the duel. With that settled, he intends to administer further punishment. Arcos Frontera intervenes as he prepares to strike with the shovel, asking him what he's doing and reminding him that the duel is over. Despite Arcos Frontera's attempts to stop him, Lloyd Frontera persistently continues his assault. Two guards step forward, apprehend him, and assert enough, the duel is over. A brown-haired man approaches Javier and inquires if he has lost his senses. Javier responds that he doesn't know. Lloyd Frontera concedes, saying fine, let go. The guards release him, providing him with another opportunity to resume hitting him. They once again seized him, instructing him to stop. Observing this, Javier thinks that, from his perspective, Lloyd Frontera seems to be targeting precise areas to inflict maximum pain on Newman. With a calm expression, it appears as if he has already foreseen the unfolding events, knowing everything in advance. The scene shifts to 15 days before the duel. Lloyd Frontera stands, resting his arm on the sword handle, and instructs to teach him the SSS core technique. Javier looks at him in surprise. He questions why he appears as if he's on the run, or if he's asking him to teach him how to steal something. He explains that the core method draws mana from the surroundings, not just the mana conjured by the individual. He asks how he knows about that, realizing it is a technique he has yet to share and is still unfinished. Lloyd Frontera reveals that Javier talks about it in his sleep every time he puts him to bed with his lullaby. He questions if he is picturing him with a strangely confident expression and states that, aside from talking in his sleep, there's no way for him to be aware of it. He apologizes, explaining that he cannot teach him the technique as it is not yet finished. Lloyd Frontera suggests that he will lead it to him if he helps perfect it. Javier asks if that is possible, to which Lloyd Frontera responds affirmatively. Javier wonders about the source of that confidence. He thrusts his sword into the ground and proceeds to explain. He mentions that he is guessing he is attempting to extract the external mana and then combine it with the mana heart within him. He points to his fist as the mana heart and his palm as the external mana. He explains that, as a result, it goes boing and bounces off. He believes it seems obvious, from his mana heart's perspective, that it's a foreign object. He says it's a matter of changing the way he's looking at it and not thinking of it as mixing the absorbed mana into his mana heart, but condensing it separately nearby and using it around him on the outside. He likens it to having an auxiliary engine next to the main engine, as if they are one but also separate. He asks for opinions and says it sounds good. Javier agrees, saying he definitely seems plausible, and asks how he knew. Lloyd Frontera explains that he was spitballing and asks if it makes sense. He thinks it's that face again. He clearly knows something. At that moment, he believed he was able to perfect the SSS core technique, which he had been agonizing over for a long time. On the first try, he successfully achieved up to 3 circles. He believes that with more training, he can reach 4, 5, or more. The system window notifies him that his approval rating from Javier increased by +5. He questions if Javier thinks he has nothing better to do than learn how to use the mana heart and expresses that he doesn't need all that. He wants to be taught the absorbing part. He also mentions that he doesn't need the mana from the air, only the mana that comes into contact with his body. The story shifts back to the present, and he states that Master Lloyd determined that with this knowledge, he would be able to defeat Sir Newman, and indeed, he won easily. Lloyd Frontera moves to strike Newman. Arcos Frontera asks if he doesn't hear him telling him to stop and states that he won't tolerate him sullying this knight's honor any longer. Lloyd Frontera questions this knight's honor and tells him to take a look under that tablecloth and then decide if those words are befitting of Sir Newman. Arcos Frontera removes the tablecloth and notices many letters with stamps underneath. He opens and reads the letters. Lloyd Frontera explains that they are letters between Sir Newman and Tords, the man who defrauded him in a real estate deal. He mentions the financial status of their land, their lordship preferences, and plans to forge real estate documents. Everything they discussed is in those letters. Newman questions how he found them, as he had hidden them in a wall. Lloyd Frontera thinks that Javier will find them later in the book, and he has spent the night scampering around for them. Arcos Frontera sits on the chair and is shocked to see the letters. Lloyd Frontera thinks that he really is a kind person, as described in the book, and anyone else would be demanding his head right now. He believes he is sorry, but a kind leader and a good leader are two completely different things. He suggests that if Arcos Frontera is thinking about how to deal with this man, he would like to offer a suggestion. Arcos Frontera acknowledges that he sees it and asks what it is. He suggests letting them drop a vicious mouse on Sir Newman's head. If he is hurt by the mouse, they should exile him from the land. Otherwise, demote him to a foot soldier and give him the opportunity to repent. He asks for opinions on this proposal. A person questions why a mouse of all things. The other person responds that Sir Newman would never be hurt by a mouse. Arcos Frontera considers that the suggestion is to offer him the opportunity to repent, with the awareness that he may face a greater punishment at any time by giving him a test to pass. Bayern expresses that this is wise. It is generous while also serving as a warning to others. Arcos Frontera agrees, stating that they should proceed as suggested. Lloyd Frontera then asks Newman if he has any objections. Newman responds with a grateful no. He appreciates the mercy shown to him. He contemplates mercy, questioning whether offering a guilty party a merciful outcome would lead to a change of heart and repentance. He dismisses the idea, believing it unlikely. He thinks such leniency would only make them more stubborn and cunning, plotting ways to rise above him. He anticipates regretting this decision, vowing revenge on Baron Frontera and his associates. Despite acknowledging the Baron's smile, he declares it will be the last time. Newman inquires about the meaning behind Lloyd Frontera's statement. Lloyd Frontera responds by feeding Peepodong an almond, causing the creature to jump after taking it. He remarks that the best way to ask for forgiveness is to remember that there is none. Peepodong eats almonds and undergoes a transformation into a giant mouse, shocking everyone present. The transformed Peepodong falls towards Newman, who becomes scared. Peepodong lands on him, and Lloyd Frontera expresses disappointment. He orders Newman's exile, believing that with this action, the rotten apple of the land is removed. After a while, Peepodong runs on the road with happiness. Javier inquires about what Sir Peepodong is doing. Lloyd Frontera explains that he is carving out a road. He mentions that now that the once feeble soldiers look like proper construction workers, the real work can begin. He reminisces about an ancient city called Rome, expressing admiration for roads. He talks about the method used to create the Great Appian Way and announces his intention to use that method, starting from his lordship's manor to the base of the eastern mountain. Javier questions the need for a road, to which Lloyd Frontera responds by saying to wait and see, as it's going to put their land on the map. Javier asks where he suddenly acquired this knowledge. Lloyd Frontera points out that he built a heating system that no one had ever heard of and summoned a high-level creature out of nowhere. He questions if Javier really doubts that he is Lloyd. The system window notifies him that Javier has suspicions about his identity. He contemplates that, based on what he read in the book about this character, if he were to discover that someone else had taken over the body of his lord's son, he might use his sword against him. He believes he would go to such lengths and more, but there is no need to worry because he possesses a special skill for times like these. Lloyd Frontera mentions that he studied when no one was looking and questions if that's not allowed. The system notifies that special skills are activated insistently. Javier remarks that when no one is looking, all he does is drink. He counters by stating that he was being observed 24 hours a day. He adds that he says no before going to sleep while taking a dump and asks if he knows what he is doing, inquires his awareness. Javier questions how Lloyd Frontera explains the summoning magic, stating that even a skilled mage with 20 years of training would find it challenging. Lloyd Frontera inquires how Javier is so adept at conjuring mana in his early 20s and if he has ever had a teacher. He asserts that they must have a genius here. Javier denies considering himself a genius. Lloyd Frontera retorts that Javier can be a genius, but he can't. He explains that he was born with the gift of summoning, so what does it matter? He declares that if Javier has nothing else to say, he is leaving because he has things to do. The system window notifies the end game of the special skills, stubborn insistence, and a speedy topic change. Lloyd Frontera moves, thinking if it sticks, and he believes it did, deeming it okay. He instructs Bayern to oversee this road while he is away. Bayern agrees, assures him that he will take care of it, and wishes him a good trip. Javier requests to come along, stating it is his job to watch him. Lloyd Frontera agrees, calling it a silly thing to say, and when asked about the destination, he reveals he is going somewhere far away to reclaim money that was stolen from them. After a while, in the small border town of Ludinia, real estate Conmentord sits in his bedroom, holding his head, and exclaims, "Unbelievable to lose that much money. They must have used some trick." Towards' bodyguard questions if that is not how gambling works, adding that until now, he has also earned his fortune that way. He mentions that if Towards cannot pay for him to protect him, he will be taking his leave. Towards assures him that he has enough for that and will come up with the rest, so he can't go. He instructs him to keep in mind that he will be gone until the moment he defaults. Towards expresses his belief that he can always find another easy mark to get money from. He emphasizes that first things first, there are people out to get him, so they should stay hidden for a while. Lloyd Frontera enters the room by kicking the door and inquires if they are talking about him. Towards asks who he is. Lloyd Frontera confirms that Towards does not know what he looks like and introduces himself as Lloyd Frontera. He asks if that rings any bells. Towards is shocked to hear the name. Towards' bodyguard asks if he shall kill him. Lloyd Frontera declines, suggesting they run instead. He picks him up, jumps out of the window, and starts running from there. Javier stands outside, holding a sword, and instructs him to leave Towards there and walk away quietly. He warns that if he refuses, he will see him as a co-conspirator. He reflects that it is just as Master Lloyd said, they will try to escape out the back window and wait for them there. Towards' bodyguard remarks on Javier's youth and questions if he even knows how to hold a sword before initiating his dark magic. Lloyd Frontera looks at them from a broken window and contemplates that Javier vows revenge after losing his master, Baron Frontera. He manages to find the conman, Towards, and engages in a fight with his bodyguard. He thinks it is Javier's first time coming face to face with a dark enchanter, and he struggles to hold his own against gravitational magic, as mentioned in the novel. Towards' bodyguard throws dark magic at Javier, but he manages to stop it with his sword. The magic spreads all around, and Towards' bodyguard remarks on Javier's naivety before attempting to punch him. Lloyd Frontera thinks that in the book when Javier fought that guy, he was just an average high-level sword expert. Javier utilizes his mana heart power to attack, but now he is equipped with a triple circle mana heart. Javier attacks with a sword and questions what the previous move was, mentioning that it felt like magic that increased one's weight. Towards' bodyguard starts moving up and states that their contract is no longer valid. Tord becomes scared, and Javier asks if he understands the seriousness of committing fraud against a noble family. He throws him away and declares that he will cut off his legs and have him crawl to the courthouse. Lloyd Frontera intervenes in their fight and asserts that it's enough, stating that Javier is out of control and that if he goes to court, they will have his head. Javier looks at him and thinks this man is showing pity for another person. After a while, they tie Towards to the chair with rope, and Lloyd Frontera sits in front of him, saying, "Come on, there's no need to be so scared." He remarks that everyone gets a little greedy sometimes, understanding why Towards seized most of his opportunities. Lloyd Frontera questions the severity of beheading people for it, considering the law a bit harsh. Towards asks if he is going to forgive him, and Lloyd Frontera responds affirmatively, stating that he won't take him to court. He assumes Towards is grateful and instructs him to hand over all of the Baron's remaining assets. Towards agrees willingly, expressing his readiness to do so if it means being forgiven. Lloyd Frontera clarifies that it's just the beginning and insists that Towards needs to do something else to be forgiven. Towards pledges to follow his command, prompting Lloyd Frontera to present a contract paper. Towards questions the kind of contract, and Lloyd Frontera explains that it's a normal employment contract with a paid salary. He adds that 80% of the salary will be withheld as repayment for the money he defrauded them, estimating that it will take 520 years to pay it all back. Towards reacts with shock. Javier thinks that he knows it, and he is not about to forgive the man. Lloyd Frontera says that he believes he would be stupid enough to kill the guy who owes him a debt, and he'd never let that go to waste. He contemplates that he is going to suck him dry for the rest of his life. Towards expresses his disdain for such a shamefully unjust contract and questions if that is so. Lloyd Frontera responds that he can't force him to sign it and suggests going to court. Towards quickly signs the contract. After a while, they sit on the cart, and Javier suggests that they have got some money from this man, so they should not have to worry about the interest for a few months. Lloyd Frontera asks what he means and says that he is going to invest this money in hiring more men. He adds that with what they have already started, more than 30 soldiers are needed. He thinks about putting up a help wanted sign and wonders if any of the villagers would apply, expressing annoyance at the hooligan reputation they have. The scene shifts to a few days later at Frontera Barony. A board is placed in writing, stating that they wanted a salary of 20 gold per week. and for more information, one should inquire at the tourney square of the Baron's estate. People stand in line to get their salary, and Lloyd Frontera sits on the chair in front of the line. He asks Javier if these people did not all hate him. Javier responds affirmatively, stating that they absolutely did. However, he mentions that Lloyd Frontera delivered an affordable on-doll system on time, took care of the traitor, and even summoned a creature. He explains that he is now considered a trustworthy and talented man, wondering how that can be. A worker calls Lloyd Frontera and inquires about the work contract. Lloyd Frontera responds with a yes and instructs them to sign. He expresses gratitude, mentioning that their child used to suffer from a severe cold during every cold spell. However, this year, thanks to Lloyd Frontera's on-doll system, they no longer have to worry. The worker bows down and expresses their heartfelt thanks. Lloyd Frontera asks if that is so and expresses that he is very happy for him. He reflects on trying to satisfy his greed and now feels embarrassed. The worker mentions having a relative in the neighboring Lacona land and inquires if Lloyd Frontera would accept an order from him as well. Lloyd Frontera thinks that the first stage of his big plan is finally here, and he didn't build all those on-dolls at a loss for nothing. He plans to use the travel expenses as an excuse to increase the cost and profit from it. He laughs and agrees, stating that, of course, the worker would need to pay extra for the travel expenses. Javier looks at him and thinks that there's that shifty look on his face again. This was the reason he built those on-dolls at a loss. So then he wonders why he is constructing that road to the mountain. After a while, Lloyd Frontera stands with Javier, holds his shovel, and mentions that pretty soon these mountains will be stripped bare. Javier asks what he means. Lloyd Frontera explains that an on-doll requires an astronomical amount of fuel, and these trees here won't be enough. Javier expresses concern, stating that he knew this would happen. Lloyd Frontera responds by mentioning the construction of the Appian Way. He elaborates that at the end of the road, they are going to mine for black coal and sell it at a huge markup. He adds that once people get used to an on-doll, there's no getting out of it, and of course, he will give the people of their land a small discount. Javier thinks about how sneaky and devious this plan is. Lloyd Frontera comments that he probably thinks he is sneaky and devious, and if he does not do this, does he think he will be able to repay their debts? Javier admits that this is the best solution for now, but it's not as if the Baron leaves the black coal undisturbed because he is unaware. He mentions that previous barons have tried several times. Lloyd Frontera responds that he knows the mine collapsed due to the weak bedrock, but he can do it. He asserts that he has the benefit of modern excavation technology, the shield tunneling method. He urges them to go, stating that there is so much for them to do. Javier thinks about the shield tunneling method, acknowledging that he has never heard of it, but decides to trust him for now. He reflects that their lord is a new man, and he has a plan. As they approach the tunnel, they find it